So people need better things to argue about. The second thing is that there's a lot of generational bickering going on. Have you noticed that? This is within a church that would like to include lots of generations. All right? The church, a congregation, is one of the last institutions in our culture that continues to invite people together across their differences. Almost every other institution that we deal with wants to segment us and target us and keep us in what they call pure markets, so that they can talk very easily to us, and they put us in very comfortable settings, except for congregations that continue to call us back together across all those differences. Again, you know, Tom Long is one of those people that has such remarkable language, and he points out that the congregation is probably the only place that you and I ever go to be with a group of people that we would not choose to be with under other circumstances. And then he says, what we always have to remember is that everybody in that congregation feels exactly the same way about us. Because we sit down together across our differences, and some of those differences are generational differences, which is what we want in order to be able to pass the practice of the faith on. Okay? Every single generation develops its values as a corrector to the excess that they see in the previous generation. Basic principle of generational cohort theory. The application of that principle is simply that every single generation speaks badly of the one that comes after and the one that went before. You know? And we want everybody to be happy. Third thing I've learned is that people have a very shallow theological language, but a very deep preferential language. A song can sing to their heart and they can't explain why. But boy, can they tell you, I like that song, but I don't like that one. Much of what is happening in our congregations and in our communities is very normal, natural, healthy human behavior. But we haven't figured it out. Now, as I said, there's a whole lot of other things that you could add to that, those of you who have been doing this work for so long as well. But what I'd like to suggest is that these kinds of learnings bring us to the point where we have to acknowledge the fact that we have been willing in the Christian church to live with pseudo-community, with false community. Because we've not been willing to move into the differences that make us who we are. Pseudo-community is an idea that came originally from Scott Peck, basically saying that the only way you can get to authentic community is by going through argument and disagreement. But we don't want to do that. I mean, think about this. We want to be inclusive as a church as long as I don't have to change my behavior to accommodate somebody else. Have you heard that? We want to be multi-generational, but we think it's wrong when anybody understands other folks of a different age. We want to be good decision makers, but we have to insist that everybody will agree right from the beginning. We want to name our truth as if there are no competing truths. Do you hear it? All those wants. Well, the reality is, I want hair, and my wife would like to have a chatty, introverted husband. But those things are not going to happen, because that's not the nature of things. Much of what we're experiencing simply because it is the nature of things. Have you come across Brooke Hollifield's work on God's Ambassador? This is the history of clergy in the United States or in North America, beginning way back in the 1700s. What's remarkable about that, and it's a Lilly-funded research, what's remarkable about that is that he is able to trace back into the early 1700s exactly the same arguments that we have today in congregations, especially the arguments that happen between lay people and clergy. We have not missed a beat over all that time. Why? Because it's the nature of things. And I'd like to suggest that the fact that these arguments have been going on for so long is not at all disconcerting. Because where the hope is that we're getting better at them. It isn't that we shouldn't be having them. It is that we have to get a lot better when we do. How are we doing? You making sense so far? Okay, well, part of what we're looking at here is the 10th anniversary. Part of the invitation was to look back on what was done well, and all I'm simply suggesting is that the practice that we have been sharing has been serving us well, so that we can serve the church well. I was also asked, reflect ahead. At an anniversary time, the anniversary moment is always a good time, not just to remember where you were, but where you're going. And so reflect ahead in terms of the work of JustPeace. And all I can say about that is we're just in time. We are just in time. The United Methodist Church is now facing into a new stage of heavy lifting. We are about to go through one of our more difficult periods. We have finally learned that the church, its clergy, and its people are not the focus and the care and the attention of the church. Okay? The church is not the end product of the church. The end product of the church is the mission of the church. We are a people who are to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. You have had to have heard that before. That's what we are to be about. And what that means now for the first time is that our people and our resources are no longer the focus of the attention of our church. They are the tools and the resources to be used by that church. What that means, friends, is that you and I are no longer dependent on the care of the church. We are the resources that are to be expended by the church. Now, how do you think that plays out in a dependent system? Where people have been invited over a long period of time to see the church as caring for them. Now to realize that if we are to be who we have been called to be, those who have been cared for have to be expended. Now expended doesn't mean to be discarded. It means to be used up. We are to be used up for a great purpose. Another way of saying the same thing is we have changed the contract on the leadership of our denomination without anybody asking for the change. Do you have some sense that we're in for a difficult conversation here? We have reinvented connectionalism. This is another thing that I've been watching that I think is absolutely fascinating. And I think, one of the reasons that you can begin to see these things is because they're already happening. It isn't that we just want this to happen, it's already happening. We are reinventing connectionalism. In my adult life, the basic definition of connectionalism was always by institutional measure. We are connected by institutional functions or products or services. What connects us in our United Methodist connection? Well, primarily clergy deployment does. The appointment system connects us. The apportionment system connects us. The pension system connects us. The health insurance system connects us. Our property, especially our trust clauses, connect us, even with people who would like not to have that connection. Do you hear it? Each and every one of these connections that seem to be so dominant in our lives are institutional measures. And now what we're hearing are people who want to be connected, but they want to be connected by purpose and by story, not by institution.